Hello, everybody. So I decided to take yesterday's events with philosophy, and I'm calling this video the Great Bluff. And frankly, it's the same video I've been making for 2 years about the Fed. Oh, now they're saying we're only going to cut rates twice in 2025. It's still a bluff. Remember that 50 basis point cut where they surprised everyone. Remember that September cutting right before the election. It's like this is the polar opposite of intelligence. Just talking about the Fed and thinking about the Fed. So I'm gonna try to keep it short, and I'm gonna try to keep it on the actionable stuff. What's the actionable stuff? It's MicroStrategy. I bought MicroStrategy again, and it had been a long time. And sure, I'm increasing my cost basis by a lot. I'm paying like 10x more than what I was buying it a year ago. But I do think right now, I mean, to me, when I look at the price, when I think where it's headed, in my view, we're headed much higher. We're headed much higher. This is what I tweeted on X. I think we're not bullish enough. I think I'm not bullish enough on Bitcoin and MicroStrategy. I don't want to sound like a bull, but I'm kind of a bull on this one. And that's just entertainment. You're free to think that this is silly, but for example, I wouldn't do that to Palantir. I don't understand Palantir. Palantir has had a similar performance to MicroStrategy. I wouldn't do that to Palantir because I think Palantir is squarely overvalued. I think the market is still trying to figure out how to value MicroStrategy, but to me, this is trading right now under 2x NAV for a stock that shows that they've been able to consistently add Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin to the balance sheet. And the bluff of the Fed, the Fed speech today, just shows me they have no handle, in my view, on the economy. That's just my view. If you disagree, as Saylor always says, and you're fine to disagree, shorts are welcome. You're welcome to short the stock. I always get some bad comments whenever I cover MicroStrategy. You're very welcome to short the stock. This is just entertainment. This channel is just entertainment. I bought at 343. I didn't get the lowest point. The lowest point was 338. I didn't get that. I got 343, but I made a big buy at 343, and I'm very happy because I was worried about the cash accumulating. I also bought a few more stocks, and I've put those on Patreon. So when I look at my spreadsheet as of this morning, the stock's back up at 349 in pre-market trading. It's actually at 367. But if you take 349, so higher than the 343, you're at a 1.9x Bitcoin NAV. 1.9x Bitcoin NAV. And don't forget that this is actually a little lower than that too, because I don't even include the value of the underlying business of MicroStrategy. That underlying business is still likely worth $1 billion. So it's it's like 98% a Bitcoin play, 2% software, a sleepy old software business intelligence play. So it's actually probably more like a 1.88. It was squarely below a 1.9 yesterday. Bitcoin, of course, shot back up. It's above 102 today. Who knows where it will be this evening. The great thing about that is the volatility is still here. I saw many people say on Twitter, well, it's been less and less volatile over the past 2 weeks. Well, guess what? I mean, with the Fed and with Bitcoin, the volatility is back. The volatility is still here. We had that major drop yesterday, so the volatility is still here. I think Saylor right now is looking pretty darn smart, having tapped that ATM on Monday and Tuesday. Isn't he, right? And we know that it only takes him like a day to turn it around. What if he was buying Bitcoin on Wednesday at 97K when Papa Powell was speaking? What if he was doing that? Because it's very likely when we see the action of the stock, it's very likely that he was tapping that ATM, especially on Monday. And so, did he have time to turn around? Did he actually issue ATM when Bitcoin was on 107, when MicroStrategy was near 400, and now he's buying Bitcoin? Was he buying Bitcoin under 100,000 because it stayed under 100,000 for a few hours? So did he do that? He's looking really smart. And let me just conclude. Unfortunately, I guess I'll spend a second wasting some breath on Papa Powell, but it's like, do I even need to do that? I mean, unelected official. We know the new leadership of the United States, the new president of the United States. There's all of these old tweets where he says that he doesn't like him, not even a little bit, and I quote the president of the US, but it's an unelected official, so there's nothing you can do about an unelected official. And you know, it's to me it's just a bluff. It's what the Fed has to do. I mean, is the economy really that strong that you can afford to have only 2 rate cuts in 2025? When I look at the S&P 500, do I really not see so many zombie companies? Do I really not see so many companies that have the debt to be rolled over, and they're going to have to roll over that debt at a rate which will simply drive them into bankruptcy? Do I not see that? So do I not see households? Do I not see people who borrowed money at the top? Do I not see cities who did that same mistake? And especially the elephant in the room, which is the trillions of debt of the government, of the US government. So the rates have to go back to zero. In my view, there is no alternative. The famous TINA, it's always been the case, it is still the case, they have to come down to zero. There's just too much debt in the system. There's just too much debt in the system. But, you know, I've made a lot of videos about this in the past. Feel free to look any of my macro videos where I talk about it. Today, I just want to focus on the positive. So they want to do that. They want to say only 2 rate cuts. They want to do that. Well, guess what? I guess he's bringing us cheap European vacations, because the Europeans in the central bank in Europe is not bluffing as much. So he's giving us cheap European vacations. It was at 103. And €1 got you $103. It's going to keep dropping. Is it going to go back to like 80 cents in a year or in 2 years? And so, anyways, if you live in the US, this is a good time to vacation over here in Europe. And I know many Europeans, actually, who are eager whenever they get a paycheck to turn it into USD and mostly US stocks, because that's my channel. That's who I reach. But many Europeans just follow US stocks and put it in US stocks because you want to have a derivative of a US dollar. A US stock is a derivative of a US dollar. A European stock is a derivative of a euro. And, you know, they seem to be a little faster with the rate cuts. And so are all of the other central banks. The US remains the most stubborn, or the most hopeful currency. It's the currency that says, oh, we are still amazing, and so we are not going to drop the rates. The mighty dollar is mighty. But, you know, this is a bluff. This is a bluff. There is just too much debt in the system. Period. And you know, the whole idea of inflation at 2%. So to quote some anti-Bitcoin YouTubers, you know, some people call Bitcoin religion. Well, I call the Fed and I call the 2% goal entirely religion. It's religion in the CPI. It's believing in the CPI. Before I go to the CPI, you know, let me tell you that nobody is so average that they exactly fit the CPI. The fact that the CPI is just this calculated basket of the average person, and the bureau that handles that gets to pick what goes in the basket or not. You know, what the Bitcoiners always point out is the story of the ground beef versus real beef. You know, one of these years, decades back, ground beef got real beef got a little expensive, so they were like, okay, well, people like ground beef better, so we're just gonna switch it, and we're gonna turn steak into ground beef. And that's how they manipulate kind of a CPI like that, by just making elections. The truth is, there is so much debt that the debt always grows. People refinance. Consumers refinance their credit cards, refinance their homes. Cities, they just issue new bonds to refinance the old bonds and to pay for new things. Governments, they just issue new debt to pay for their projects. Nobody ever pays the debt off. The pie of debt always grows. And of course, most of that growth comes from the commercial banks. But, you know, the Fed has convoluted ways to also engage in that growth of money supply, namely the BTFP program, which nobody talks about anymore. I don't know how many hundreds of billions that program has right now, but they're like, oh, you're going to see the bank. Okay, your paper is worthless, dear bank. You lost 80% on that bond that you issued in 2020. Well, that's okay. Just pledge it to the Fed with the BTFP program, and we're going to give you face value on the bond. They have all of these programs. The money stock is this convoluted thing. It just keeps growing. On the other hand, Bitcoin is money backed by energy. It's money backed by energy. It takes so much energy to mine one Bitcoin. And we see it in our miner stocks. We see it. The average miner, it costs you about $50,000 worth of electric bills at 4 cents a kilowatt hour in order to mine just one Bitcoin. 50 grand of electricity. Bitcoin is money backed by energy, and it's limited. It's limited. It's not backed by bluff or by trust or creating this impression of trust. That's not what it's backed by. It's just backed by energy. That's why Saylor tweeted this yesterday as the Fed was going, the Fed meeting was going. This is what it tweeted. The future of money will be determined by physics, i.e. energy. Right, that's an aspect that Bitcoiners are all about, and I'm all about that. The U.S. dollar at some point you could have argued it was backed by oil, and before that you could have argued it was backed by gold, but really it's never really been backed fully by gold or by energy, because we don't have a count of many units there are. We don't have a count. What I always say on this channel is that the M2 money mass is just an estimate, and it's just within the US financial systems. There's plenty of dollars outside of the US financial systems, and they also grow the pie, and it's the same for every country. It's a complete mess. I love Bitcoin. That's why I tweeted this whole, every time I see the Fed, I want to double down on Bitcoin. And I'm so happy we're seeing more and more companies who are looking at their accounting, looking at their treasury, and considering the treasuries to be held in the form of Bitcoin. So you are fiat derivatives for your revenue line. Your business operations is all fiat derivatives. Paying your taxes is all fiat derivative. But when it comes to your retained earnings, you transfer them into something durable, which is Bitcoin. And I think that's going to be one of the ways of the future. I'm so happy to see this development happen. Anyways, we live in a world, lastly, and I'll conclude with this. We live in a world where we probably need money suited for a deflationary world. Bitcoin is money suited for a deflationary world, because in the world of Bitcoin stays flat. That's why we say one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. Bitcoin stays flat, but everything else that we value, that we love, becomes cheaper over time because of the human endeavor and the human process. And I don't know about you, but I live in a world where I actually find that there's a lot of things that are very deflationary. Sure, you can nitpick and you can complain about one product or another product that is getting more expensive, like food, for example. You don't really see that in food, right? There's a few aspects of, say, healthcare, or people who have kids with daycare, like if you have kids, or sort of like, you can find areas that are highly inflationary. That's true. But there's so many more areas, in my view, that are very, very cheap and big buckets, right? So the idea, for example, of personal teachers with LLMs, it's amazing. I use LLMs, large language models. I'm on Grok now. I used to be a Llama 3 fan. Now I'm a Grok fan. It's free. You can get, this was generated by Grok, this summary, right? It's not my summary. It's what Grok gave me, the summary, because I didn't want to listen to it. So you can have your custom art. This thumbnail of Papa Powell in front of the Christmas tree holding a cheap stock market Christmas gift, that's generated by an AI. So you have a custom artist. Music is literally free. Think about the Spotifys of the world. People in the 90s used to spend 10% of their income. Young people in their 20s in the 90s, they would spend 10% of their income buying CDs because they were into music. And today we get it for free. Cost of tech, cost of TV, cost of entertainment. We've never had this much entertainment for this cheap, right? And you may say, oh, well, technology is not a big part of my life. Well, that's understandable. Well, guess what? There's bigger parts of life, like real estate. If you look at the cost of real estate is in a deep crisis right now. If you're in the market to buy a house right now, you can make some really aggressive offers, provided you have the cash. If you have the cash, you can make some really aggressive offers, and there's a lot of fire sales in real estate right now, and that's a huge bucket of inflation that is a rent equivalent in the CPI, right? But owning it is getting cheaper. Real estate is getting much cheaper. So is the world really that inflationary? Well, and the last one is expensive. You know, some people talk about cars and they say, oh, cars are so expensive. They're getting so expensive. Well, I'm not so sure about that, because when I look at Gen Z, when I talk to the Gen Z, they're literally canceling the idea of a car as their budget. They Uber everywhere. And when they don't, they get a DoorDash or they get a Uber Eats. They get a little subscription. It's I think it's $9.99, and then you get all of your food delivered, and you don't even have to drive. So again, the world, in my view, is deflationary. We live in a highly deflationary world, and the only money that is fit for a deflationary world, in my view, is Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is denominated in something that is fixed. The debt is ever going higher, as I said, and that's why the rates, they will go back to zero. There is no alternative. They will go back to zero, because if they don't, we're just going to grow the pie of debt even more, and the inflation will look even worse on any metric that they choose, the CPI or else. And you know, it's just, anyways. I'm done. This is not a macro video. I don't do macro videos anymore, because they make me mad. So I don't do macro videos anymore. But I hope this gives you a little bit of my thinking of this. Enjoy your holidays. Be positive about all of this. This is a gift from Papa Saylor. So thank you. And this was not financial advice.